Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Tate, and I'm the president of the Board of Psychology. We're just going to we're missing a board member, so we're going to give a few more minutes. And just as a reminder, we're going to, when I start the meeting, I'm going to call it to order. We're going to do roll call and immediately go into closed session. I'm guessing, and I say guessing really lightly, that it will take us 30 to 45 minutes, and then we will resume the agenda. So just giving you a heads up. So I'm going to call to order in just a few moments. Thank you. It is 9:05, and I call this meeting to order. Ms. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga.
Here.
Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets. Nystrom. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Rascate. Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here. Quorum is established. Thank you so much, Ms. Whitney.
You're welcome.
The board is going into closed session, and bear with me while I read this, for discussion and possible action on board executive officer classification exempt salary level increase. The board will meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, 6A1, to consider the pay range of its executive officer. And also, agenda item number 15, the board will meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126C3 to discuss disciplinary matters, including petitions for reinstatement, modification, or early termination, proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reinstatement and modification of penalty, petitions for reconsideration, and remands. Again, I'm guessing this will take 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll resume the open session. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. You may have noticed I was having very significant tech issues, and I am not a tech person. But we have solved them. Welcome back. We are back to the California Board of Psychology open session. This is our second day. Ms. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga.
Here.
Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets. Nystrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Briscotte. Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here. Thank you. Quorum is established. Before I jump in, I would like Ms. McCochran to come up and give us all of the tidbits about CPD.
Hi, good morning. So attending today's board meeting provides you with CPD credit under category number 1, attendance at a California Board of Psychology meeting. For your CPD records, please notate today's date as March 1st, 2024, and note that we are here for the board meeting. At the end of the meeting, I will announce how many hours you can be credited. To receive meeting attendance credit, you will need to be physically present at today's meeting. For 2024, board meetings will be held in person, and physical attendance will be required for credit, and committee meetings will be held via WebEx. And I will be available during breaks to answer any questions you may have relating to CPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCochran. We're going to jump to agenda item number 16. This is public comment for items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Before I invite speakers to come forward for public comment, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. And this also refers to current and pending complaints and possible future complaints. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. While there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board cannot discuss or take action. In addition, if there is a speaker before you who expresses thoughts that are very, very similar to yours, please feel free to verbally agree with previous speakers instead of repeating the exact same comment. If anyone, I'm just getting a tally, is anyone intending to speak during this time? Can you just raise your hand, please? Okay, thank you. Sir, would you like to come forward and have a seat?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Make sure, pull the microphone closer a little bit.
How is that? Excellent.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Douglas Beatty. I'm a psychologist here of the state of California. I had just two very quick questions, and again, they probably will be tabled till another time. It's a thing called PsychPack. Okay, from my understanding, that providers from other states are being allowed to do teletherapy in California.
Sir, actually, so do you want to hold this comment until the agenda item regarding PsyPact later in the agenda?
Is that? Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then I'll hold that for later.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Okay,
The other question was our increase in licensing fees. It went up to about approximately $300. Just was wondering why and where those fees are being distributed.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Please come forward, have a seat. Not seeing. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 17 is the DCA update. This will be from Mr. Brian Clifford, who's the Senior Planning and Implementation Manager. Hello, Mr. Clifford. Good morning. Good morning. Make sure you turn that on and pull it to you a little bit.
Is that good? Great.
Yep.
Good morning. As the president said, my name is Brian Clifford with the Department of Consumer. Okay. My name is Brian Clifford with the Department of Consumer Affairs Executive Office, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. First, a budget update. In December, the Department of Finance issued a budget letter that directs all agencies and departments under the governor to take immediate action to reduce current year expenditures. Except for time-sensitive, emergency-related, mission-critical, or information technology needs, immediate actions include the cancellation of all non-essential travel, such as participation in seminars, conferences, and training both in-state and out-of-state. Boards should immediately review all spending and determine where savings can be realized. Specifically, when planning meetings, it is important for boards to conduct a cost analysis to determine the most economical option for the state. Please remember that when traveling, you need to consider all forms of transportation and hotel accommodations to determine the most economical option for the state. DCA has issued further guidance to leadership about exemption requests for purchases, contracts, and travel. And DCA appreciates your partnership as we work together to reduce costs. If you have any questions, please contact Board and Bureau Relations. And then a DEI update, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting on December 15th, 2023. The committee reviewed a draft DEI intranet webpage for employees, re-elected its chairperson and vice chairperson for 2024, and discussed DEI trainings. After approval at the meeting, the committee announced the launch of the DEI intranet page to department staff. This page provides a centralized location with DEI-related tools and information and real-time updates on the department's DEI activities. Providing DEI training opportunities continues to be a priority for the department and the steering committee. DCA is pleased to offer board members a DEI training on how leaders navigate DEI dialogue in the workplace. The training is recorded and can be taken online at your convenience via DCA's Learning Management System, or LMS. The online training is provided by Christopher Veal, who has 25 years of corporate experience providing coaching, training, and leadership development. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to DCA Board and Bureau Relations. On February 2nd, DCA held an active threat assessment training for board and bureau leadership teams. The California Highway Patrol provided the training where participants learned about steps that can be taken in the event of an active threat. DCA plans to explore providing this type of training to all board members and staff in the future. Also on February 2nd, DCA provided guidance on the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act amendments to the teleconference meeting requirements, which took effect on January 1, 2024. The guidance provides a general overview of the traditional in-person and teleconference meeting requirements and a detailed discussion of the legal requirements and best practices for conducting meetings using the two new teleconference meeting procedures. DCA is here to help boards navigate the new requirements, and you can please direct any questions regarding the requirements of teleconference meetings to your board legal counsel. And then a couple quick implementation updates. The department successfully developed and launched a new process and online portal in support of military service members and their families following new federal and state laws passed in 2023. This new DCA online portal allows boards and bureaus to accept online requests from military service members and their spouses who currently hold a valid license in good standing in another state in California within the same profession or vocation when they relocate to California because of military orders. This online portal allows DCA boards and bureaus to timely receive, track, and review requests to ensure compliance with federal and state law. Registrations are required to be approved within 30 days of the board or bureau receiving the necessary documentation. In addition, DCA's Military Resources webpage and board and bureau licensing webpages were updated with this information. And we've currently have over 3 dozen individuals approved thus far. And then SB 372 was signed by Governor Newsom in September and became effective January 1, 2024. This bill requires DCA boards and bureaus to update license records if they receive government-issued documentation demonstrating a legal change of name or gender for gender transition or domestic violence reasons. This bill allows licensees to request their prior name not be published online in connection with the license or current name, and establishes a process for individuals to access a licensee's enforcement records under their prior name. DCA established a global web page for all boards with a universal form for licensees to make these requests. And then lastly, Business and Consumer Services and Housing Agency welcomed a new secretary in February. Secretary Moss was appointed by Governor Newsom, and we extend a warm welcome to her and look forward to working under her leadership. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. Any board comment?
Mr. Clifford, thank you so much for being here today. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate the way that DC is working to be commensurate with the times. I really appreciate the DEI efforts. I also attended the training on active threat situations. It was illuminating, eye-opening, a little terrifying.
It was.
Also, but I felt really equipped with information that I didn't have prior to the training. So I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Any other board comment? I'd like to open up public comment for this item. This is agenda item 17, the DCA update. If you have a public comment, please come forward and have a seat. Thank you, Mr. Clifford.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 18 is the DCA budget presentation. Mr. Burke, please.
Good morning, President Tate, Vice President Rogers, board members. As of fiscal month 6, the board projects collecting $7.25 million in revenue during the current fiscal year, 2023-2024. Board staff will continue to monitor revenue with the budget office monthly. As for our expenditures, based on FM6, the board is projected to spend approximately $8.1 million of its budgeted appropriation of $8.4 million, leaving a balance of approximately $316,000. With me is budget manager Suzanne Balkis and our budget analyst Nicole Brady from the DCA budget office. And they'll be able to talk in more detail about the attached documents. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? A little bit closer? Feel better? Okay. Good morning. My name is Nikki Brady. I'm a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes today to present the agenda item number 18 and the documents that are included. First, I'm going to start with the board's board's expenditures agenda. It's page 18, number 25 of your materials. These projections are based on actual data through fiscal month 6. The report includes 2022 through 23 actual expenditures compared to 2023 through 24 budgeted and projected expenditures. Over the 2-year period, costs have increased as a result of the increases in personal services and costs in OE&E, which is mainly in AG and OHA costs. As we move to the end of the document, you'll see that the board had a beginning balance or base budget of $8.481 million, and it is projected to spend a total of $8.165 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of $316,000, a reversion percentage of 3.75%. The next document I'll be going over is the board's revenue projections. It's item number 18, page 26 of your materials. This report includes receipts collected through FM6 December of 2023. I'll go further into the projections as we transition to the next slide. The next slide is item number 18, page 27 of your materials. It's a board's fund condition statement. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and then left to right. The left column is the board's prior year 2023-24 projections based on actuals through fiscal month 6. It shows the board began of 2022-23 with an adjusted beginning balance of just over 6.2 million. The board collected 5.7 million in revenue with a 743,000 from initial license fees, 4.6 million from licensee renewals, and 388,000 was collected from the issuance of citations, fines, and delinquent fees and other revenue. The board expended just over 7.2 million, which includes 550,000 in direct draws to the direct draws to the fund for statewide pro rata and pension payments. The board ended 2022-23 with just over 5.7 million in reserve balance, or about 7.9 months in reserve. For current year, the board's projection revenues of just over 7.26 million, with an 885,000 projected from the initial license fees, 6 million from renewal fees, and 379,000 from the insurance of citation fines and delinquent fees and other revenue. The board is projected to expend approximately 8.6 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund leaving the board with a fund balance of approximately 4.3 million or 6.6 months in reserve. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with a monthly expenditure projections as we close fiscal months in the current year. A few things to note on the board's fund condition. The fund condition is a snapshot in time. One of the main factors of driving the expenditure increases in the future years is a result of personnel service adjustments. These include general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. The fund balance reserve is the amount of funds remaining at the end of any given fiscal year. The board's fund has a statutory fund balance, a limit of 24 months, but typically 3 to 6 months is considered sufficient. As you see, the fund balance is healthy and showing growth over the next 3 years. The budget office has no concerns and will continue to monitor the budget and provide updates to the board on a regular basis. And lastly, I would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would create cost pressure on the fund. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep the line of communication with the board's executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. Again, I want to thank the board members and the executive staff for allowing me the opportunity to present at today's board meeting, and will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for being here. Any board comment regarding the presentation? Mr. Fu.
Thank you, President Tate. Mr. Burke, I have a question for you with regard to the public comment earlier with regard to the increases in our fees. Would you be able to share with us that prior to the recent statutory increases that went into effect, when was the last time the board had increased its fees?
The last time we'd increased our fees via statute was in the early 1990s, in approximately 1991, I believe.
So in the past 30 plus years, have the cost of operating the board increased?
Yes, they have. As the DCA Budget Office alluded to, we have increases in salary compensation, retirement contributions. We also have pro rata we pay to DCA, because when all the state workers in certain union categories get the fee increase, gets salary increases, these costs are then passed on to us during that formula. We also have a big driver of our costs is through the Department of Justice, the AG costs, the lawyers' fees, the attorneys' fees. That when they increase, that's additional cost to us. And essentially over that 30-year period, a revenue structure that came into existence in the early 1990s no longer covers the expenditures that exist doing business in California in the 2020s.
And with regard to the personnel costs that you just referred to, does the board set the personnel cost range, or is that established at a statewide agency level like CalHR?
Yes, it's statewide. It's not something the board can determine. We can control certain costs, overtime, things like this, but no, in terms of a statewide 3%, 5% salary increase, the board and staff have no say in this.
And with regard to the amount which the fee increases were established, did the board undertake a fee assessment or some sort of evaluation to determine what's the appropriate fee increase?
Yes, we did. In 2002, these conversations began in approximately 2019. In 2021, board staff presented a comprehensive fee analysis, looking at how much it costs to do individual processes, and then what fee structure we would need to equal the cost of doing business. This was presented to this was submitted to a board ad hoc committee. It was presented to the board in 2021. We did all of this in conjunction. We had a lot of help with our partners in the Department of Consumer Affairs who helped us check our work. The board then established the fee structure. And then we went to the legislature to shop that as part of the legislative process.
And last question, actually I won't say that because I famously will say last question. I have two more if I follow. So I'll just say another question would be, you mentioned the Department of Justice as one of the costs that we have very little control over. What is the purpose of of the Department of Justice invoicing us, if you will, with regard to the board's operations?
We are first and foremost a consumer protection agency. When we receive complaints and we determine through the initial complaint review and intake process that we have a case where we could prosecute a licensee, we reach out to the Department of Justice. There are lawyers at the Attorney General's office who prepare the accusations, the stipulated the statement of issues, rather. There are hearing costs, and that lawyer's time in preparing all of this costs money. And of course, the amount of money they're paid goes up fairly regularly, and those costs are then passed on to us with very little. We have no say in the matter.
So, for example, yesterday we had a licensee seeking a reinstatement of their license, and we had 3 licensees seeking a early termination for probation. Those costs are Department of Justice costs that would be invoiced to us, including the administrative law judge. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we don't have control in terms of the number of licensees who are seeking reinstatement of their license or changes in any probationary terms. Is that correct?
No, we don't have a say in that. We're presented in a bill and we have to pay it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fu, for, as always, very insightful questions. Dr. Phillips.
Just to underscore something, Mr. Burke, could you tell us what our experience has been with attorney's fees over the past 5 or 10 years?
I don't have the specific numbers right in front of me at this time, and I apologize for that, but they have gone up consistently year on year. I think certainly in the last 10 years, they've gone up quite significantly.
And they've taken some healthy leaps.
Yes, they have.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other board comment? I'd like to open up this item for public comment. If you do have a comment, please come forward and have a seat next to Mr. Burke. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment on agenda item number 18? Nope. Thank you. Thank you for coming and presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we move on, I have Ms. McCochran. Would you like to step forward and give us some information on the upcoming webinar?
So on March 21st, we'll be holding a informational webinar regarding the fees. It will be held via WebEx, and it's going to be March 21st, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So Mr. Burke is going to be presenting on the fees, and then there's going to be a Q&A session, so attendees have the opportunity to ask us questions regarding the fees. And it's via WebEx. Information is on the website. We sent out emails. It's also on our social media. Thank you.
Thank you for the information, Ms. McCochran. We appreciate that. Moving on to agenda item number 20. This is the Licensure Committee report and consideration of committee recommendations. Yesterday, we were able to hear 20B, C, and E, but today we're going to hear agenda item 20A, and this is the licensing report. And we are looking for Ms. Shaw. Oh, I see you. Perfect.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. All right, good morning, board members and attendees for the licensing report. I am going to start off with the BREEZE update, which include the launch of the Registered Psychological Testing Technician, also known as PTT. And we have launched this application on BREEZE as of January 4th, 2024. On BREEZE, we have the PTT registration application, the PTT add or change supervisor form, change of address form, and the renewal application. And in addition, this is the first licensing report that we will include PTT data. However, since the PTT only became effective the beginning of this year on 1/1/2024, the PTT data is still pretty limited. So moving on to attachment A, it provides the licensing population report and each license status as of February 12, 2024. I want to provide an updated number for PTT, which as of this morning, we have a total of 14 registered PTT. And then going on to attachment B, you will find the application workload report. Please note that these data are a snapshot of open and approved application on the date the data was pulled. So the open application is not inclusive to the total number of application that was open on the listed month. Rather, it is the number of open application when this data was pulled. For further clarification, the number of open application mean those number are the application that are still in open status as of February 12, 2024. And then starting with the psychologist application workload report, you will notice an increased trend for the open application for exam eligible for EHPP, which is common to have a higher number of open application in the more recent months because those the board process application and dates receive order. And for clarification purposes, the initial for psychology, the initial application for psychology licensure transaction, which is also used to process the request for initial licensure application, is also being used as a follow-on transaction to the exam eligible for EHPP transaction. An insight to our current business process, upon approving an exam eligible for each EHPP transaction, we immediately open the initial application for psychology transaction for the applicant. The reason that we use the initial application for psychology licensure as a follow-on transaction is primarily to automate the process of keeping track of the 12-month exam eligibility pursuant to our regulation. So with that said, you can see the similarity of the data trend for approved exam eligible for each OP and open application for the initial application for psychology licensure. It is important to note that the number of open initial application for psychology licensure shown on this chart doesn't mean we have a high number of initial psychology licensure to process, but more so that we have approved a similar number of exam eligible for each OP application. And then for exam eligible for complete, that's our initial complete transaction for first time test taker. It seems like there's a decreased trend on there. We anticipate it will jump back up in the early spring. And for the complete retake transaction, that's the retake transaction. You will know there's a jump in the first month of each quarter. That's because the candidates are only allowed to take the complete or retake the complete only once per quarter. And then moving on to the psychological associate application workload report. There is a decreased trend of the initial application in December, which is typically what we observe in the past for the winter season. Then it will start to pick back up in the beginning springtime. For the psychological testing technician, we don't have much data to compare it to, but this is the data we have for the month of January. Moving on to attachment C, it provides the number of new application and notification received in the last 12-month period. In comparison to the same 12-month period in 2022 to 2023, there is a decrease of 67 psychologist application and 28 psychological associate application. Then there's an increase of 145 psychological associate notification. And for clarification purposes, the notification is the request to change supervisor or service location form. And then we have attachment D. It provides a 6-month overview of average application processing timeframes and business days. The processing timeframes are available and updated on the board's website every 2 weeks. We have here on this attachment D are the first set of data collected for that month. Looking at the psychologist application processing timeframe, we have an increased trend at the end of 2023, but the most recent data in January and February show a decrease in processing time for psychologist application. For the psychological associate processing time frame, it seems to be fluctuating, and it is in our radar that for the month of February, the processing time frame jumped. So we are aware of that, and we are looking at that in case if it goes any further out, we have staff that we plan to delegate the psychological associate application for. And then we have the psychological testing technician, which we don't have much data for, but those are the processing timeframe for January and February. That will conclude the licensing report. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for the report. I'm excited to see the psychological testing technicians' numbers going up.
Yeah.
Any other board comments, Mr. Fu? Nope, nope. He really did have a finger up. I didn't make that up. Any other board comment? I'd like to open up this item for public comment. If you have a public comment on the licensing report, can you please come forward and have a seat? Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We're moving on to agenda item 20D. This is the OPES presentation on examination performance. Thank you.
Or whoever has it loaded. I got it. I got one.
Thanks.
Should be on here.
Good thing we're on a laptop.
You might have to turn
Yeah.
your display settings to mirror the second display.
I'd actually rather it not mirror so
Oh,
that
there
I
you
can
go.
present to
Slide
that.
for a
and-
second.
Yeah, let's give me a second. Slideshow. Yeah. Our aim's a little off, but aside from that.
See if I can zoom out. Are you full screen on there?
I am full screen on here.
What's the cutoff? Any settings that we can exit full screen? See what that fixes it. I know the resolution on this is not very well.
I can go here. But that's not the way we want to do it.
The board should have it.
Yeah,
The board should have it, yeah.
You guys have, do you guys have this in front of you? Fine, okay.
Well, I mean, they should have it in their materials for
Okay.
the meeting, but, okay.
I promise there's nothing
Okay.
critical in that last 5%, guys. It's gonna be okay on the right. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's cut off a little bit. All right, we're good to go? Can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. All right. So I'm here to talk about some factors that affect the California pass rates for the examination for professional practice and psychology. In order to do that, the board kindly supplied us with, or the board staff, I'm sorry, supplied us with 20 years worth of data, which was crunched, scrubbed, and otherwise analyzed. As a quick introduction, we are the Office of Professional Examination Services. This is Dr. Heidi Linzer, Dr. Robert Calvert. We exist mainly to consult on psychometric issues, so things that relate to examinations. We also develop your state law and ethics examinations. Quick overview about what we're going to do. I'll discuss the purpose. We'll talk about the variables that I analyzed, how I prepared the data, what trends we see, and then there's going to be a little bit of time for questions afterwards. I already told you who OPS is. The purpose of today is to examine this data. There's no way that we'll be able to talk about causation in any way. That's not the type of study this was. This is really just looking back over data and talking to you about trends. I do want to talk for a minute about what variables I used. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on why I used them and what I used. So the first is it was believed or presented that APA accreditation may have something to do with the pass rates with California. California allows people who had not gone to APA accredited schools to take the test, and other states do not. So that had been put forward as a possible explanation. Therefore, the first variable we look at is what school a person attended. Is that school currently APA accredited? And I want to point out that's a minor flaw in the study. I don't know if it was APA accredited at the time that student went there. I just know right now, is this APA accredited or not? So that's the first variable. The second is to break it down even more minutely, to talk about the school. What school did they attend? As a spoiler, there are significant differences by what school you attended and how well you do on a test. That should surprise none of us. I then took Alliant and pulled them out separately, not because I want to push any light on Alliant, but because they're a very large school. They take up a large number of your candidates, and they are APA accredited. So it was a good group to kind of compare back and forth. And then the last two I looked at were the age of the candidate at the time they took the examination and the degree that the candidate earned in order to qualify for the examination. This is the first chart I created in looking at this data, and I want you to just understand that's how I felt initially. So with that, there was a lot of data that needed to be cleaned up. It's really important, by my view, when you give reports on data to explain what you did to the data. So this is my report to you on what I did with this data. If there was a score below or equal to 200, I removed it. You get a score of 200 by showing up and taking the test and not answering anything, or not showing up. So those were removed. I removed entries with missing birth dates, with missing schools or scores or degrees. There weren't a ton of those, but I did. I removed entries that had clearly incorrect information, which is to say someone who was born in the future. There were not many of those, but I did remove them. I also consolidated degrees. We had codes that came in as like a PsyD 1 versus PsyD and a PsyD 2, and that just has to do with how the data was stored in the database. I collapsed all that down into PsyD, the same across the board. And then some schools changed their names through time, and where I could find that happened, I consolidated that as well. And then I had to go through and add the school information. So that's where I went through and searched up. APA publishes what schools are APA accredited, so it was very easy to just go through and take their publication and mark it as APA or not. Okay. You're going to see these words a ton, so I'm going to slowly go over them a few times. It's important to me to cut up data in different ways. Sometimes we're measuring an attempt on a test. The same person could attempt a test multiple times, but it's the same human. So are we thinking about attempts on a test, or are we thinking about people? So when we say a first attempt, a person can only have a first attempt once. It's a measurement of a human. A candidate's best is still only once. Your best score ever is still your best score once. But attempt variables, you could have 50 attempts, and each one of those is counted. So I break it up into these three categories so we can understand the difference between the test itself and taking a test, an attempt on a test, and what happened with a person. Most of the time, the only one of these that's reported is the first attempt, just so if you were to compare over to other literature, that's standard practice. But because I have the data, I can cut it up these three different ways. My first section here is just going to talk about trends. This isn't separating data in any way, shape, or form. It's just telling you what's happened over time with this exam. This is your average score. It's important to know that during this entire time frame, passing is 500. That doesn't move. So from the beginning to the end, what it meant to pass was 500. This is your average score for a first attempt. This is a scaled score. We have clearly dropped over time. I'm not needing to talk about that. Here's your average score for your best attempt. Now, you'll notice that this bottom is still 540. Your best attempt is still well above passing, and you're going to find that out throughout every way we cut this. Most people will eventually pass, regardless of where they went to school, regardless of their accreditation. But it has gone down. And your average score for all attempts is actually well below passing at this point. We passed passing in 2015, and it just keeps going down. This next slide is to show the difference between an attempt and a pass. So the blue line is every attempt by your first attempt, and the yellow line is the pass. So the distance between those two are the number who attempted and didn't pass. The reason I bring this up is to kind of see that that distance remains relatively constant. It increases a little bit throughout this whole time period. So even though the overall trend is going down, the underlying phenomenon appears somewhat stable. I want to contrast that to the best attempt line. Just look at the distance between the two lines. Your best attempt is very commonly your pass. Very few people have a best attempt that isn't a passing attempt. And again, that's going to be true as we push through this data as we cut it up. However, the distance for all attempts has gotten much, much larger. What that means is that people are taking this test a lot of times that don't pass. Those people who do not pass on their first attempt are likely to attempt many, many times. And that's changed. That wasn't true back in 2002. Okay. This last one is just talking about pass rate. We've basically moved from a pass rate on your first time attempt of 80% down to 60%. Your best attempt remained relatively consistent in the mid-90s up until about 2018, remarkably close to COVID. At which point it dropped down, but it only drops down to 86%. I realize that looks somewhat precipitous as a drop, but still most people are passing. The other thing I want to point out is every other chart I've shown you goes through 2022. Why then does this stop at 2020? It stops here because this is the measurement of your best attempt. If I go right up to now, you haven't had time to get a best attempt. So we can presume by cutting off that last little bit that I'm actually measuring what's occurring for the individual. If I didn't cut that last off, it drops down to the same as what a first attempt would be, because it is now measuring really your first attempt. And last, here's your pass rate for all attempts that went from close to 70% back in 2002 to a current 40%. Again, this is the one that's low, the all attempts, the person who takes the test over and over again. Some general observations I've already said, but I'll say them again. The number of candidates has increased over time, just the sheer number of people who are taking this test. The pass rate has decreased over time, and the average score, whichever way you cut it, has gone down over time. Okay. Now we're going to talk about APA. Here are your scores by APA for your first attempt. As a spoiler, yes, not APA is lower, but it's only slightly lower. This does not explain in any way the difference in California's pass rate for a first attempt. In fact, during some of the years, the non-APA was higher. When we look at your pass rate, which is different than your score, the pass rates also have remained relatively close throughout time. And yes, non-APA is lower, but it isn't the dramatically large amount lower that it would take to be like the smoking gun. Now, this is the one that I think is my most important slide for you here, and that is the number of people who are not APA who are taking this test has gone down dramatically. The vast majority of your candidates are APA. So we put those two things together. Pass rate for APA and not APA close, not APA is lower, and there's very few people who are not APA, means it can't be the APA accreditation that makes California's pass rate lower than other states. It doesn't add up. All right, this is your score by IPA on your best attempt, and again, these remain very close to each other throughout your time, and I do cut it up to best attempts, and it drops a bit as we get closer. And your pass rate by best attempt still is in that mid-90s. It dropped recently, but not large enough, again, with the sample size to make your answer. That's the same thing I just talked about. Score by APA. And this is our all attempts space. And in this one, the non-APA is, 50 points lower than the APA. That's a little bit more. And as we push into the data, you might find that those people who attempt this examination many, many times might be more likely to come from a non-APA school, which was what would show up here. But again, the number of people is relatively low, and the score when we look at first and best attempt is close. And our pass rates. Okay, I just went through that. Number of candidates by APA, I already did. And this is the all attempt. So this is just measuring all of the attempts, and you actually have a few more attempts here from your non-APA. In other words, more people are taking the test a lot who went to non-APA schools. All right, some general APA observations. The scores from candidates attending APA accredited programs are slightly better than those from non-APA programs, but the eventual pass rate is pretty close. As time passes, the performance decreased for both groups, and the vast majority of your candidates today attend APA accredited programs. So if it's not APA, what's the difference? And I have a blank slide. All right, schools. My short answer to you is, surprisingly, there is a large difference, not surprisingly, obviously, but there is a large difference in performance based on school. There are many schools. I could have had a graph that had 50 lines on it. It would be very hard to read. I selected a few schools to get across the general idea. So in this case, I have Alliant, which is your little blue line there. It's the third. It's not terrible, not great. I took UCs. They're the green line. I took every UC that we have. I clumped them together. It's a total of about 30 students a year. They do remarkably well. They also don't put out very many students. And then I have the Chicago School, which is that yellow line, which is heading down to the bottom. And we can kind of glance through this and say, okay, over time, UCs have done well. They've done well when this test changed, if it changed, but throughout time, UCs still perform really highly. The Wright Institute, which is the red one, also relatively consistently performs across. However, Alliant and the Chicago School have a trend down over time, just on their score. This is a few more graphs to mess with you. We don't need to think about what all of those lines are so much as that there's kind of clearly this group at the top which is, I could read them for you, but these same schools, your UCs, your Wrights, that are all throughout the time kind of staying up there. And then we end up with other schools that are dropping down. And this is your first-time pass rate. So we end up with these like 80 to 90% first-time pass rates, and then we've got 40% first-time pass rates. Okay, well, we know that a person who's going to attempt the test multiple times is likely not do well multiple times, and that's going to get you a difference relatively quickly. You'll notice Alliant, which has the vast majority of your students, ends up with a first-time pass rate around 50%. Alliant is the blue line at top, which has all of your students as compared to every other school below. This is just a measurement of the number of students that go to these schools. So when we kind of consider the second largest in this list is Chicago, which is the one that was doing pretty poorly in my previous. So your top two schools by candidate are scoring middling to slightly below middling on this test, and that's a lot of people. All right, score average, school best attempt. This is your best attempts. Well, in your best attempt land, you still get this little clump at the top of the schools that are doing well. They're passing at a high percentage, and then you have your second kind of tier of schools that the best attempts are right around passing. Okay, well, if your best attempt is right around passing, you probably didn't pass the first time, and you're probably taking this test a few times in order to get to your best attempt. This is school average going back to my few charts for your best attempt. Chicago's average best attempt is slightly below passing. Alliance is slightly above passing, and then you end up with your UCs that are so far above passing it's not worth comparing. School pass rate, again, by your best attempt, and we end up with the same scenario, that you end up with your lower schools that are kind of in that 70s, and your good schools still remain in the high 90s throughout the time. Let's get past that. We already talked about the numbers. School average score, all attempts. So, of the three options, all attempts is probably the least helpful because it's not measuring a person, it's measuring sitting down and taking the test once. But in this all attempts category, both Chicago and Alliant have an average score below passing. Your two largest schools, by attempt, not passing. G is not accessible for anyone. Oh, it didn't show up on your guys' screen. Sorry. I have an error on mine. I'm trying to get it to be quiet. All right. So, some trends there. There's a clear relationship between what school someone attends and their performance on the examination. Different schools have a different trend. Some of the schools were able to remain consistently high performance with their 30 students a year. Other schools have trended down over time. Just the sheer number of candidates, Alliant has more students than the next 5 largest schools. One of the next largest schools is Chicago, which also wasn't doing exceptionally well. Now I want to talk about Alliant for a second, just taking out this group. So I have Alliant and not Alliant that I'm comparing to each other. And this isn't because I want to throw Alliant under the bus, I just want you to see the trend over time. And the trend over time is that Alliant has trended down faster than not Alliant has, just in terms of their average scores. And this is by your first attempt. The pass rate, similarly, has trended down for Alliant faster than not Alliant. And the number of candidates by Alliant versus not Alliant has actually gone down over time. In other words, Alliant has less of the pool than they used to. Just contextual information. Now, when we consider your best attempt from either school is still likely passing, whichever way you want to cut it up. And this is the pass rate, which really stay really close to each other. The eventual pass rate for your best attempt is, I'm not going to say identical, but pretty nearly identical. So when we're measuring people eventually pass. When we're measuring sitting down and taking the test, there's a difference. Score by line, all attempts. It's a similar thing. Pass rate, all attempts. Okay. So when we look at this all attempts category, for both groups, we've trended down from 60 to 70-ish% down to the 40 to 30-ish%. That's the same thing you're going to see other ways we cut up this data. Okay. Some observations about Alliant. The comparison shows that Alliant is doing slightly worse than not Alliant, but over time, both groups have trended down. And over time, Alliant takes up a smaller portion of your candidate pool than they used to, even though they're still very large compared to other schools. Okay. This age category is, how am I doing? Where's my timer? Okay. Breaking down this data by age, I want to explain kind of why I did that and what's going on here. So instead of taking equal ranges and saying 25 to 30, 35 to whatever, I took all of the data by attempt and I just made them into 8 equal categories. So why I did that is to show that there are small differences just in a year or two between when you take the test. And then we have to consider that. Well, your goody-goody student who went and got their bachelor's degree, then they did the master's, then they got the PhD, then they were already set up to go and get their hours, and they were right on time, shockingly does really well on the test. However, just 2 years later, 3 years later, you can see a difference. Well, what does that mean? That means somebody at some point in there got distracted. Not distracted, maybe, but got thrown off of what that kind of like normal, ideal-ish course is. And we can continue to see that there is differences by these age groups throughout our time. We can also see, and I'll just give the spoiler, that across every analysis, the older you are, the worse you're likely to perform on this test. That does not mean the test is ageist. I did not run that analysis. I cannot make that claim. That's not what this does. But it does tell you that the person who's choosing this as their second profession is not very likely to do well on this standardized test. Also, though they make up a relatively low number of total people, candidates, they make up a large section of attempts. Which is to say they take the test many, many, many times. So, with that said, if I was to examine this graph, things I want to point out for you that I believe are important. If we go back to 2002, and you look at that pass rate for all ages are above 500. The beginning of this chart, everything's above 500. Every group's average first attempt is passing. However, today, the first attempt for that oldest and second oldest group is 50 or more points below passing. That is a dramatic difference in outcomes for people. I'm going to go to best attempt. I just skipped a few. And I want to talk about this pass rate for first attempt. So, again, back in 2002, approximately 70% of the oldest candidates were passing. Today, on their first attempt. Today, it's between 30 and 40%. Whereas our youngest candidates have stayed pretty stable. Back in 2002, they were 85-ish%. Now they're 80-ish%. Okay. So things have moved through time, but they move differently for different ages. Okay. Now this one's a mess. So all I'm going to point out for you is recall that the number of candidates in the oldest group is relatively low. They are tied currently for the most attempts. In other words, few people are taking this test many times, and they're continuing to fail. Sure, it might not be verbatim. Few people are taking the test many times and continue to fail. And they're old. Older. I was corrected. Older. They're in the, yeah, we'll just go with older. All right. Where was I? I want to pick a slide because I want to talk, and I want the slide to have something to do with what I'm saying. We'll go with pass rate, best attempt. I like best attempts. Do I not have? I don't have best attempt here? Okay, that's weird. All right. We can imagine many things that are different about a candidate who is taking this test between the ages of 46 and 80 than there is the person between, 20-something and 35. They've just had likely very different life experiences. I want to emphasize as much as I can that I cannot in any way say that there's anything about this test that is unfair to older candidates. That's not my analysis. There is a way to run that analysis. I don't have the data to do it. However, it is clear that the trend has changed and that the performance of the oldest groups has decreased greatly over time, whereas the performance of the youngest groups has remained relatively consistent. That's my best summary of that. As age increases, overall scores tend to decrease. As time passed, performance decreases for all of the groups, but for some groups a lot more than others. And I've said this, but I'm going to say it again. Difference is not bias. There is a difference here by age. That is not a bias by age. There are ways to find that out. We have not done that. We're sure that there is a difference by age here. We have no evidence of bias. Okay, moving to degrees. Short answer for degrees. PhDs, being slightly biased myself, do better than EDDs. And PsyDs. But PsyDs and EDDs perform relatively similarly. EDDs do worse. And there are very, very, very few EDDs who take this examination. That's all. There's nothing more to say about degrees. Very, very few EDDs. Yes, on average, they do worse. However, some pass. They have a pathway to be able to do so. If you're moved to the pathway, none of them would pass. Yeah, PhDs. Oh, and the other thing is that the number of PsyDs has increased over time, which I think we all knew. All right, a summary. There's evidence that this test has changed over time. The school a candidate attends is a strong predictor of examination performance. Most candidates attend APA-accredited programs today. Those programs perform slightly better than the non-APA accredited programs. Older candidates pass the examination at lower rates, and they account for a large proportion of recent attempts. Not candidates. There's relatively few candidates there, but many attempts. And the degree type has moved a little bit over time, but PhD, then PsyD, then EDD is a consistent pattern. Thank you. And do you have any questions? I'm 3 minutes under time.
Thank you so much. You presented this data during the licensing committee, and still fascinating. I love this data. It's just incredibly fascinating. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked in the licensing, because I'm assuming there are some people in here who might project that COVID might have hit some of those dates. So tell us about that.
Give me a second, because I like charts. Let me find one that, I'm not even going to cut it up. Sorry. We'll go with first attempt. That seems good. Do you guys see what I have up there, or are you just looking through your chart? Can you see? Oh, I'm sorry. I went all the way to the beginning. I'm an average score for first attempt is what I pulled up. So it's like the 7th slide or 6th slide, something early. And the reason I pull that up is just to back up what I'm about to say. This change appears to have started around 2014, 2015, which is prior to COVID hitting. There is another drop around 2019, 2020, but a pretty substantial drop occurs prior to that.
Thank you. Any other board comment? I assume there's some questions, perhaps. Mr. Fu?
I suspect I'm going to get reprimanded for my question, and I welcome it, Dr. Calvert. So the exam is a knowledge-based exam, and there's an introduction of a skills-based exam that is forthcoming. Are there particular aspects, observations that one can make about a knowledge-based exam relative to the insights you've shared with us today that might change in a skills-based exam based on your experience at OPES?
I won't reprimand you, but I can't give you a good answer either.
Thank you.
I would say that I'm certain there's a large amount of research that talks about those differences, and that I don't have it at my disposal to answer your question.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the chart that you pointed out, the first attempt chart where there are drops, and it seems like there's a drop around 2008 and around 2020. Is that kind of like...
Or your average score for first attempt, is that the one you're looking at?
Oh, wait, no. I'm looking at no, I'm looking at the... sorry, I'm looking at the different...
I'll go to yours. I just need to know which
okay,
one you're
sorry.
talking about.
I guess I was looking at the first attempt candidates.
So that would be the number of candidates.
Yeah, the
who
number
were-
of candidates. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at that there's a drop in 2008 and around 2020. And I'm thinking, like, those are the times when there's some financial, like, crisis that, is like, economic, economic factors. So I'm thinking that, maybe some of those do you think some of those have played a role in some of the data that
Can I
happened
just say
around
yes?
this time?
Yes, I think that many factors play a role in what these are going to be, and one of them that we know relates to school attendance and the way you're going to move through and whether or not you make it to this is what's going on in the economy. People go back to school generally when the economy is really bad because they're hoping to get a degree to go get a job. But it also would, I think, really depend on your field. So like psychologists is a different thing than going and becoming a welder. So I would need to look into it more to talk about it in more depth, but I'll start with a yes. I think that would have an effect.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Dr. Rogers?
Thank you, Dr. Calvert. This was fascinating. I'm so thankful for this report that you put together and this robust analysis. I have a question for you about folks who do not pass the exam the first time. You mentioned that folks who don't pass the first time sometimes take it many, many times. Do you have a sense on average the number of times it takes those folks to eventually pass the exam? And does that change depending on age?
Yes, and yes. And I'd have to get you, I can get back to you with exact numbers.
Okay, that
but
would be really helpful.
Yes, the by attempt, if you don't disaggregate it by age, most people pass between their first and second attempt.
Okay.
If you were to consider it that way across all of them. Then if you just take repeat test takers, we get rid of everybody that passed the first time, it becomes like between, 2 and 4, depending on how you cut it up.
Okay.
The oldest group, when I ran this analysis, and I don't have the exact number for you, was substantially different than the others when I cut it up by age and by attempt. And I am happy to send you an email for that as soon as I'm done. It won't take me long to get you that info.
Okay. Okay. The reason that I'm asking about that is for two reasons. It's costly to take this test. And then if you have to take it multiple times, that racks up a bunch of fees. So I think about that in addition to the increasing cost of entering the profession. And now I'm also thinking about it with the introduction of the EPPP Part 2 in 2026 and the implications for that. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the number of times that non-first-time passers might have to be in this loop before they can actually enter into the profession.
Yeah, I can give you an email that gives you a quick answer to that.
Okay.
Secondly, if you wanted more analysis of it, and my boss says yes, I'd be happy to do that for you. It won't take me long to be
Okay.
able to cut that up.
Fantastic. That would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other board comment or questions? Dr. Cervantes?
Thank you for presenting this data analyzed in this way. It's very informative and helpful to us. You conclude that a school a candidate attends is a strong predictor of examination performance, and I know you didn't conduct this type of analysis, but we see this in other education research, and that is that admissions requirements to the various programs impact that
Very widely,
student outcome.
yes.
And so I just wanted to add that possibility. I know we can't conclude that from your analysis, but that's
You can infer that from this
a
analysis
very,
just fine.
but that's very likely an
Yeah.
influencer as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry. The microphones were echoing, so I had it a little bit away from me. Were you able to analyze for the older test takers how long the time span from their completion of their degree to the exam?
Yes, I was. It was one of the things that was removed from the already excessively long slide deck. So yes, I was able to analyze that. And the short answer was that it was relatively close to when they earned their degree, that they were doing their first attempt.
And they were still passing at lower rates?
They still have a substantially lower pass rate, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Any other board comment? Dr. Kasuga?
In the data that you have, do you have data around people that received accommodations
No.
when taking EBBB? So no.
I do not. The data I received was from the board, not from the vendor. So it would be what the board chose to supply. I can look back and ask if you have info on accommodations. I don't think so. I pretty much asked for all the information they had to crunch it. Well, I can tell you it wasn't in what we got. There's no question in my mind on that. Yeah, because the accommodation would likely go through the vendor, my guess, and they'll tell you later, is that they wouldn't have a record of it. If the accommodation went through for our test, for the state level test, we would know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No. Some boards do it. They'll answer.
Yeah,
I don't.
I'm just wondering because that data would be interesting to look at as well.
Yeah.
Any other board comment or questions? I'd like to open this item up for public comment. If you do have a public comment. Oh, hello, Dr. Winkleman. Do you want to come forward and have a seat? Make sure that microphone's pulled up, and on, actually. Is that on?
I think it's on, right?
Perfect, yeah.
Hi,
Pull it forward.
Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. Thank you for that excellent presentation. It was even good the second time I also listened to. Anyway, I hope I didn't miss the data on the question that I'm going to ask. I wanted to know, is there any way to determine the percentage of applicants who attended a APA accredited versus non-APA accredited school? I know you have the attempts, but do you or does the board have data that on what is the percentage of either applicants or licensees who are from accredited versus non-accredited schools?
Yes, is the answer to your question. We do have that.
Great.
This would give you, let me find it for you. This isn't a percentage, what I have up there for you, but that's the number of candidates on their first attempt. So over time, right now, the number from non-APA schools has gotten considerably smaller comparatively. I have the table that made that, so I can easily divide them out for you if you would like, and give you the percentages at any given point.
That would be terrific. Perhaps I can.
Yeah, just hand me a card.
Hand you a card later.
Yeah, easy.
Okay, very good. Okay. And in terms of the licensees, so these are the applicants. Does anyone have the data on the current licensees on there, whether they have graduated from APA accredited or non-APA accredited schools?
Yes, and I provided it earlier for Mr. John.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I'm asking this because, of course, it's relevant to our later discussion of SciPact, and I know a lot of questions have been raised in particular about that particular requirement, and knowing the actual numbers would be super helpful. So thank you.
Yes, I have the data. I also reached out to Dr. Calvert to try and determine if we could get an approximation percentage of the number of APA accredited versus non-APA accredited licensees that we have. It isn't something that we really track. So Dr. Calvert and I had a meeting, and I sort of explained what we were looking for, and he was able to dig out what we have. And what we have is, I believe it was the number of candidates who have taken and passed the CPLEE examination. That's the closest we can get to try and determine what the current look of the licensing population is. And the data provided, I believe it was from 2002 to 2020.
22.
To 2022, so it was a 20-year. The total number we had was 5,861 people had taken it and passed. Of those, APA were 3,841, non-APA 2,020, which is about 66% APA versus 34% non-APA. However, as this dovetails with what Dr. Calvert's already said, that's not an exact representation of maybe what the overall licensing population is now, because if you go back to 2002, the number of non-APA was considerably higher than APA, and those numbers have switched over time. So now there's far fewer non-APA. Am I correct in saying that? I'm trying to nutshell what Dr. Calvert told me.
The question is, we don't know what the accreditation looked like back in 2002 for these schools. So it could be that they weren't APA'd then, they are APA'd now. And we only have right now what is APA'd, which makes it likely an underestimate as to how many are non-APA'd, because that's the direction it would go. If you weren't APA'd then and you were now, you have a non-APA'd license.
Okay, thanks very much. I didn't memorize that, so I'm going to have to get the data from you all later. Thank you.
Take some notes. Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. Dr. Horn, do you have a public comment? Perfect. I saw a hand, but I can't see over the chair. Okay, thank you.
So, hi there, I'm Jackie Horn, psychologist in California, and I actually work on the EPPP, so this is, I also have attended both your presentations, excellent presentations. I really thank you for doing this deep dive. I just have a couple of points of clarification that I'd like to make, that I don't know the impact on some of the data, but I just want to say that. So first of all, you did by school. APA doesn't accredit schools.
It's by
it
program,
accredits
I'm sorry.
programs.
I'm sorry, it is accredited program, not accredited
Okay,
school.
okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. So I just wanted to make sure that these were accredited programs you were looking at. The other thing, a couple of other things. One of the, you were talking about like 2002 is, and why people are seem to be taking it more now, the exam more now. Prior to 2002, and the exam was became computerized in 2002, people could only take it twice a year. Now they can take it 4 times a year. So I think that might contribute to it. We also saw the same decrease in scores from COVID. And there's the ASPPB doctoral program report. Pass rates by doctoral program is online. And we broke it's a 5-year rolling pass rate chart. And we actually broke it down to the years right prior to COVID versus the years after COVID. All schools were affected by that. But the one more thing I wanted to point out too was that you showed the scores, and this is a pass-fail exam, so 500 is passing. It doesn't matter if folks get 520 or 540 or 500 and
625.
yeah. that doesn't matter. It's 500 is the passing score. So a lot of that, even though the actual scores have gone down, it looks like still the pass rates are
Because it's a
there.
scaled score,
Mm-hmm.
and it's scaled to the 500, which is
Right.
good, the way we report it. For the person, I absolutely agree. When you pass, you don't get your score.
Right.
However, to see the differences between schools, a school whose average score is 500 is very different than a school whose average score is 650.
Absolutely.
That's why I
A program
include the
whose,
scores. Yeah,
whose
that's why
scores,
I
yeah.
include the scores.
Absolutely, yes. Anyway, there was one more thing that I just wanted to clarify, but I can't find it, so. Again, thanks a lot. This was really helpful, and I would send everybody to just the pass rate charts so that you can see pass rates by program. Seem to, again, everybody was affected by COVID, but it looks like accredited programs were affected significantly less than, impacted significantly less than non-accredited programs, according to our information. So thanks everybody.
Go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Dr. Horn, just a clarification question. When you say significantly less, are you talking about statistical significance?
Mhm.
Okay. And do we know what your R was on that? Like, to what degree is that relationship explanatory based on your accredited program?
According to our information, our numbers look different than your numbers. So our numbers, and we do just accredited programs across the U.S. and Canada versus, just California. So the numbers across the United States and Canada are that graduates of accredited programs consistently have a higher pass rate. But there are certain programs, and a number of them are here in California, accredited programs, that have really been impacted negatively by COVID, but also never had as high a pass rate as other programs.
So let me ask my question just a different way,
Yeah.
and perhaps Dr. Linser and Dr. Calvert can help me.
I think you're looking for effect size. Is the
Thank
thing
you.
want to know.
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested, if you were to do an interaction variable between COVID and accredited program,
Yeah.
like what you would actually be able to see the effect size would look like based on that. Because when you said it was significant, that doesn't
Yeah.
quite have as much meaning to me when we're talking about that layering of interaction with COVID.
I think probably Dr. Song would have that number. I don't have that number, but I'm sure she's probably put that together.
Which one?
Thanks.
It's related to that. In your analysis, was Argosy considered APA accredited or not?
The Chicago one? No, Argosy is a different. So I can't answer that question. I think it'll take a little bit longer than I should right now. But I could answer it today and just send you an
Yeah.
email. I have it. I
Mhm.
just don't right now know that.
So the reason why I'm asking is because, like what you said earlier, that like the APA programs were considered, the programs were considered APA in your data based on if they were APA accredited at the time. And Argosy is one of the bigger schools before they closed down, and it will be interesting to see if they were considered APA accredited in your data, number one. And also number two, I just wanted to kind of make a comment on some of the schools, like what Dr. Horn said about some of the schools in California, and some of them are in California that may be APA accredited, but have significantly lowered their pass rates and were more affected by COVID more than the other APA accredited schools. And I can speak to one school, which is John F. Kennedy University, which also went through a transition to national university. So there are other factors aside from COVID that we may not know that affected pass rates. So things like that, and things like, for instance, like the turmoil with Argosy and how those students at Argosy that are taking the test, how those changes affect maybe their studying, maybe their ability to kind of like, taking the test while they're still accredited. Those accreditation histories within those schools or their programs may affect the data in ways that, we don't know. So it's not all COVID and, it's not all knowable. And that's why we have to always be cautious when we kind of like look at, this pass rates and schools, even though there are like, trends that are kind of like visible.
Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question based on Dr. Kasuga's comment?
Yes, as long as we can get back to public comment at some point.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Calvert, those incidences or various items that Dr. Kasuga hopefully provided context for, those variables should be, when we're looking at a larger sample size, when you look across all programs, both accredited and non-accredited, those individual changes in a school's or a program's journey in terms of acquisition, et cetera, should be mitigated by looking at a larger sample size.
Correct.
So this data that you're presenting to us today, just by the power of statistics, would account for some of those changes that Dr. Kasuga indicated at an individual program level, correct?
Yes, it's highly likely that over a large enough sample, which we have a giant sample here, that small fluctuations would kind of come out in the wash. The answer to your question is Argosy was counted as APA in these records. The other thing I want to say as we're talking about schools is a thought experiment of if you took students from the UC and magically placed them in Alliant, and you took students from Alliant and magically placed them in the UC, do we think we would see the same trend? In other words, is the school really good, or is it just that the students that go to the school are really good?
Thank you. I know there's a public comment. I saw a hand, this angle. Can you please come forward? Yep. Please come forward, have a seat. Sorry I missed you earlier. Yeah, just pull that microphone towards you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Howard, a licensed psychologist in California. I am happy with your presentation, and I love your sense of humor. It's really, really nice to see that. And I'm also happy I'm not taking the test now at my age. I may be trying about 10 times. I'm just wondering about causation, really. When you said something, I'm just curious about what we added to the test that made it more difficult over the years. Was there something we added like that? So I'm just curious about that. If we know that, what we added that has made it more difficult, and if so, it looks like some of the schools are somehow not educating students to that particular topic. So I'm not sure if we added testing around DSM or other kinds of topics, but it looks like maybe some of the schools aren't presenting that in their graduate programs. So that's all. Just wanted to ask about that.
I would just say we did nothing with causation, so I can't do anything there. I can say from our previous meeting that they changed their content outline in 2015, I believe, which was interesting that matched up and chronologically with one of the drops. But that's just me reporting what the last person said, so not part of my analysis.
Thank you for your comment. Was there a hand? Did you want to come forward, sir?
Hi, maybe just add a little perspective to the test that the EPPP test. I took it 2006. So, and I went to an APA accredited program. The amount, and I got the study materials from more than one place, and the amount of questions that were not covered in all the material that I studied were astounding. So, how can somebody study for tests on material that they've never encountered ever in their life? And they can take their best guess and do their process of POE, process of elimination, but I mean, if you gave all these students all the possible things that are going to be on the test to study, I bet the test scores would probably be a little higher in first pass. But they don't. There's no possible way to do that because the material is so widespread and various. Just thought.
Good comment. Thank you, sir. Any other? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Phillips.
I was just going to point out that this is a general licensing exam. It's not just for clinical psychologists. It's for all people that receive a psychology license, and they come from different disciplines. So a lot of the domains that are covered in the test are not necessarily specific to clinical psychology. They're also in organizational psychology and experimental psychology and so on and so forth. So I think that, to a certain extent, means that for almost all of us that took the test, it was like, oh, holy shit. That's going to be an exam, huh? So it was a question of memorizing a lot of material we hadn't gotten in graduate school. And I do think a lot of graduate schools choose not to teach to the test. They teach what they feel best prepares people to do whatever the discipline is that they're preparing people to do. So
It'd be nice if the testing material that you can buy would at least be broad enough to cover at least the majority of what you're tested upon, because it doesn't even cover us, at least when I took the test.
And that has more to do with testing companies, which are outside the purview of the Board of Psychology and outside the purview of graduate programs or ASPPB.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Dr. Rogers, did you have a quick comment?
Yes. I'm really so thankful for this report. The low pass rates have been something I've been really concerned about for a while. So just to have it broken down by these categories, I'm just really thankful for that. My question is about, now that we have this information, we've had it at a committee meeting, now we're having it here at the board meeting. Is there any plan to share this information with licensees? I'm just thinking about our newsletter, for example, just so there's more information that's more broadly shared. Is there a plan for where this goes next?
Are you volunteering to write an article?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am, I am not.
Sounded like it.
I walked right into that one, didn't I? I do the wellness column. But I'm just wondering if this would, I mean, we could write something together.
A summary of the data.
Because I'm also thinking about the information from doctoral programs that Dr. Horn was talking about. I'm not sure if that's been covered in the newsletter, that report, just because I also found that to be really fascinating and super, super helpful just to see how it was broken down by school outside of California. So I just feel like this is such rich information that it should be shared broadly and widely. And if I need
it's
to,
amazing that you volunteered to create a summary for that to put in the newsletter, because I think I agree with you.
I wanted to echo Dr. Rogers and volunteer myself to support this initiative because I do think it is important consumer information to put out to applicants. They can choose to do what they want with it, but at least to know and understand where there are trends and what information they might use for their own preparation. So I'll help you out, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cervantes.
Any other public comment? Oh, in the back, please come forward, have a seat.
Good morning. My name is... Here? Good? Here? Good morning. I think it's still good morning. My name is Jayanthi Kasraj. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in California. I don't know if you got this information, but I'm really curious about gender differences, ethnic differences, and language.
I can answer one of the three. There is no significant difference by gender. We ran that analysis and removed it, and that's all there was to it. We don't have the information by race, so we can't analyze that, and we don't, as far as I'm aware, have the information by language, but I didn't have that in this analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, but women did perform slightly better than men. It just wasn't a significant difference.
That's amazing, but we knew it, though. So, we knew. Any other public comment? Is that a board hand over here? Yes.
It's very quick, just very quickly, and I just wanted to talk about the big elephant in the room when it comes to this test is like the role of test prep, the test prep industry as well. Like this test, unfortunately, cannot be passed like as well without buying those really expensive test prep materials. And it is a reality. It's a reality that's out there, and it adds another layer of financial burden to people. And sometimes it's even more relevant. I mean, it's not going to be shown in the data because we don't have that information. But like it's less about APA accredited schools or what program. It's more of whether you took the time to buy those test preps and prepare for the tests that way. And I feel like it's I feel like that it just has to be said too.
Thank you. Oh, I see Dr. Horn creeping back up here.
I'm sorry. I just want to make a comment about that. So to be clear, and thank you, Dr. Phillips, for saying ASPPB has nothing to do with those test prep companies. But I will tell you something that ASPPB does have, and they have sample exams, practice exams for both the Part 1 and the Part 2 on their website. And those, for the Part 1, actually for both parts, these are actual questions that have been retired from the EPPP Part 1. And for the Part 2, because it's not that old, these are actual questions that were written for the Part 2. And our research shows that people who take the practice exams, it's increased their increased their scores by all groups. For candidates of color, their scores increased by 20%. Their pass rate increases by 20%. So I'm just to let you know that, and again, because that's the, these are actual questions that have been on the exam. So it gives people, as you can imagine, facility with answering those kinds of questions. So, and cost of that is pretty minimal. If people decide to take those practice exams in the test center, so they'll have real world conditions, it's only the cost of the test center cost. So it's very, very minimal. So it definitely beats the really thousands of dollars that people pay.
I did take that test. Actually, passed it will be the first time, but failed the practice test. Just kind of like weird.
Glad you passed it.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. Any other public comment for this item? And I'd like to open it up for any public comment for agenda item number 20. I know we covered some items yesterday. I just wanted to make sure everyone was heard. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. We love this data, you can tell. Let's take a break for 10 minutes. We'll come back around 11:52, I guess. Thank you. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga.
Here.
Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets. Nystrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Riscate.
Wow.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here. Thank you. Quorum is established. We are going to jump ahead a little bit to agenda item number 23. This is legislative proposals, and we have Mr. Polk here to walk us through it.
Okay, let me get situated here. Okay, so item 23A is our item on legislative proposals. Item 23A is Psychological Associates Business and Professions Code 2913, change of supervisor fee Business and Professions Code Section 2987, Health and Safety Code 124-260. This item can be found on pages from 220 to 228 of the combined packet, and there was an item added to the hand carry. Mr. Polk.
Thank you. So on January 1st, or January 2nd, I'm sorry, board staff submitted a proposal to the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development for technical non-substantive changes to be included in the committee's omnibus bill. On January 16th, board staff met with the committee consultants to discuss the proposal and answered any clarifying questions regarding the proposal. And board staff was advised that the proposal would be presented to the committee members for consideration for omnibus. Currently, the proposal is still in the committee, and the omnibus bill has not yet been introduced. As stated, the proposal included amendments to Business Professions Code 2913, 2987, and Health and Safety Code 124-260. The amendment to Business and Professions Code 2913 addresses current language related to the requirements of a foreign master's degree and the advancement to candidacy, as is found that the current language has created confusion not only to applicants seeking registration as a psychological associate, but also to licensing staff when processing applications and answering inquiries from applicants. The amendment will provide clarification for applicants seeking the registration and, once again, provide clarification to licensing staff.
Dr. Tate, we're gonna consider this language as 3 separate motions. Should we pause now and consider this language for 2913? Yeah? Good, okay. So for the board and the public in the hand carry item, we have updated language for 2913. And Mr. Polk just summarized this language for us.
Sure. So this is actually updated language from what was actually submitted to the committee originally in the proposal. As it was found as the information was reviewed, that there was maybe some issues for applicants who obtained a foreign master's degree outside of the U.S. So the language proposed in this document in the hand carry hopefully addresses that issue. So in paragraph B1, the underlined language was moved from previous paragraphs, so that underlined language was included under each section A, B, and C.
Thank you. Is there any board or staff questions or comments on this? Do I hear a motion to approve the amendments to section 2913 of the Business and Professions Code?
So move.
As they appear on screen and in the hand-carrying materials.
A second.
It's been moved by Dr. Tate and second by Dr. Rogers. Kasuga, sorry. Sorry, Dr. Kasuga. All right. I'm hearing no comment from staff and board members. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, can we call for the vote?
Kasuga?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harpsheets? Nystrom? Phillips?
Aye.
Frascati? Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is the Section 2987 of the Business and Professions Code. Mr. Folk.
Thank you. Amendment to the Business Professions Code 2987 is regarding the $25 fee associated with the request to change supervisor for psychological testing technicians. As the $25 fee was inadvertently removed from Business and Professions Code 2987 when Senate Bill 816 was passed last year. The fee was included in the passing of SB 1428, which established the registration category, and this amendment would just put the $25 fee back in 2987.
Thank you, Mr. Polk. This item is on, the language for this item appears on page 225 of the combined packet. Do I hear a motion to approve the amendments to Section 2987 of the Business and Professions Code as they appear in our packet, page 225?
So moved.
I'll second.
Dr. Rogers moved.
I'll second.
And Dr. Tate second. Is there any board comment or staff?
I'm sorry, I'm going to recuse myself from agenda item
this-
23 and 24.
Thank you. Does she need to recuse herself from every vote, or you got it for the record? Okay. Just making sure. Okay, cool. Did you have a comment, Mr. Fu?
No, I was just ready.
Oh, okay, all right. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, can you call the vote?
Kasuga? She's not here. Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harpsheets? Nystrom's recused. Phillips?
Aye.
Frascati? Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
So this motion carries, and so did the last one. I didn't announce that, but, all right, thank you. The next item is on Section 124-260 of the Health and Safety Code. Mr. Polk.
Yes. The last amendment to the Health and Safety Code of 124-260
23C on our agenda. This is California Psychological Association legislative proposal for 2023 affecting Business and Professions Code Section 2914. This is also an information item. It'll be reviewed in the next Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee meeting and can be found from pages 234 to 256 of the combined packet. Mr. Polk?
Yes, thank you. For further discussion at the board's Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee meeting. There's two bills that the board is currently watching that were introduced by Assembly Member Mainshine that would make changes to continuing education. First is AB 2270, which would add section 2914.4 to the Business Professions Code, and it would require licensees under the provision to have the option of taking coursework on menopausal mental or physical health to satisfy continuing education and professional development requirements. Also, AB 2581 would also establish 2914.4, but it would be given the option to satisfy continuing education on maternal mental health and physical health to satisfy those requirements. Next is AB 2282. This bill was introduced by Assembly Member McKenna. This bill proposes that reunification services would not need to be provided or would not be provided to a parent or guardian when the court finds that the parent or guardian of the child has been convicted of a violent felony against the child. The bill would also impose additional duties on county child welfare departments and also would impose a state-mandated local program. And lastly, there are three bills that would apply to the Department of Consumer Affairs as a whole. Starting off is AB 2862, which was introduced by Assemblymember Gibson. This bill proposes that various boards and professions, including mental health and art boards, would be required to prioritize African American applicants seeking licensure, especially applicants who are descended from a person who was enslaved in the United States. SB 1012 was introduced. This bill would create the Board of Psychedelic Facilitators under the Department of Consumer Affairs by April 21st of 2025, which would license and regulate professional facilitators who are trained in psychedelic assisted therapy, Once licensed, these facilitators would provide therapeutic access for persons 21 years of age or older to certain regulated psychedelic substances. And lastly, SB 1067 was introduced by Senator Smallwood Cuevas. This bill proposes that licensing boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs to develop a process to expedite the licensure process by giving priority to applicants for a license who demonstrates that they intend to practice in a medically undeserved area or serve a medically undeserved population. Open for
Thank you
questions.
for those updates.
Yes.
And for keeping us informed. Is there any other staff or board comment on future items? Seeing none, I'm going to open public comment for legislative items for future meeting. This is the 23D on our agenda. I thought, go ahead.
So I don't know if this will answer that, but it looks like A through C are options. If that does that help?
It says, is an admitted candidate for doctoral degree and after having satisfactorily completed 3 or more years of psychology education and having passed preliminary doctoral.
B1, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but to qualify under C, okay? So to qualify under C,
By itself, okay.
right, that's including something that I'm not certain is in part of all the doctoral degree programs. Right, so you can qualify under A, you can qualify under B, or you can qualify under C. For those people under C, I don't believe that it's the intention of the board to potentially distinguish between programs that have, I mean, I got my doctoral degree a long time ago. I don't know if preliminary exams is a thing now in every program. So I just don't want to have any unintended consequences that's going to exclude people from qualifying as a psychological associate under C.
So Member Cervantes, if you so wanted to, we could make adjustments here, or we could take it back to the committee to make further adjustments, if any are even interested by the board.
You know, I think it would give staff a clearer direction of the language to present it to the committee if we just addressed it now. And I think that's, I'm willing to consider this as we would have to do another motion, right?
That's correct, because we've already taken action on this item earlier, but we can do another one, yes.
Okay, so after we finish public comment on this item that we're taking public comment, we'll close that and then consider another motion on this. Is that good for everyone? Okay, thank you. Thank you for catching that. Is there any other public comment? We are still on legislative items for future meeting. This is item 23D. I just want to make sure before we close that one. We're good? No other public comment? Were you going to have a public comment on this, because we're on 23D.
Just on C, on 23C, just very quickly, I just
Okay.
wanted to thank the board and the committee for considering the CPA sponsored, along with the California Primary Care Association, bill for reimbursement for psychological associates in FQHCs and RHCs, and we really appreciate your consideration. It would be a really important piece of legislation to retain and increase training sites and also for access to care. So that's my only other comment, is just a thank you,
Okay.
and we appreciate your consideration of that.
Thank
bill.
you. Seeing no other public comment on 23D, we're going to go ahead and close that item. And now we're going to take another motion. And now here's the motion.
For what item?
So the board just just passed a motion for item 23A that was to approve the language that's on the screen. So that's what we're gonna take a new motion on, right? Or can we go back to the old motion?
So if I could just make a recommendation, perhaps a member might want to make a motion that otherwise amends the proposed 2913 to strike out the particular phrase in C, B1C, that says, "and having passed preliminary doctoral examinations."
Does that cover? Yes, thank you.
So move.
So the motion that's been moved by Dr. Tate is to approve the amendments to section 2913, striking from example B1C, that's up here, the language that says, having passed preliminary doctoral examinations. This motion needs a second so we could vote on it.
I'll second.
And now we have a second from Dr. Rogers. Is there any further discussion on this item? Is there public comment on this item? Okay, can we call a vote?
Kasuga. Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets. Nystrom recused. Phillips.
Aye.
Riscate. Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
All right. We are done with item 23.
Thank you, Dr. Cervantes, but don't go too far.
Oh.
We're going to jump to item number 25. This is the regulatory update review and consideration of additional changes. Dr. Cervantes.
Okay, thank you. This is an information item beginning on page 462 of the combined packet. No action is needed at this time. Mr. Polk, do you have anything new to add on this item, on this report?
I have nothing to add, just that the packages specifically for the inactive psychological associate registration and disciplinary guidelines, those packages are moving forward.
Thank you. There's no action on this item. I'm Dr. Tate, I'm looking at you.
Oh, are you?
Should we start with 24 or should we hold that?
So you've closed item number 25?
Yes.
Perfect. Do we need to open up public comment for that item?
Well, it's not an action item, but if you'd like, we can. You want us to do?
Yeah, just.
Okay.
Let's be clean with it.
Is there any public comment on item 25? This is the regulatory update, review, and consideration. Seeing none, we can close public comment. Okay. So we have item 24, but before we do that, I just want to take a moment to introduce our new Reg Council.
Oh, that's true.
Mr. Sam Singh. He's joining us for our first meeting. Thank you for being here with us.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. We are going to take up agenda item 26. This is the discussion of California Psychological Association survey licensing timeframes, and this is going to be on Ms. Sorick, please.
Okay, at the November 17th, 2022 board meeting, the Psychological Association shared a satisfaction survey of its membership with the board. This survey included feedback on the board's licensing, central services, and enforcement programs. I asked Dr. Winkleman if CPA would be willing to do a follow-up survey 1 year after the initial survey was conducted in order to compare and establish a baseline from the first survey. It was determined that if CPA were to do another survey, the board would like to see the data received. As such, CPA completed a survey as a follow-up in October of 2023, and included in the meeting materials is the initial survey from 2022 and the follow-up survey from 2023. What we can take from the survey is that there are areas where the board showed improvement and where the board still has improvements to be made, and I'm available for any questions. And just want to thank CPA for doing the initial survey, and then as a follow-up ask from the board doing the follow-up survey.
Any board comment from Ms. Sorick? Go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Ms. Sorick, in reading the comments, one of the consistent themes that come up is reaching someone on the phone and having difficulty getting a call back. And I don't think that necessarily reflects the values of the board and where we would imagine we would want our board operations to be. What steps have we taken to address those issues with regard to communication, both by phone and also the other theme was just not getting a response when you email the board? How are we responding to that feedback operationally, and what are the goals for us to be able to return emails and phone calls?
So I think one initial thing the board did right away was we had a vacant administrative position in the central services unit that we moved over to the licensing unit. And this was an individual, shout out to Kenny Tran in the licensing unit, who has assisted Tammy Bailey on incoming calls and emails to the board so that we can give status updates as to where applications are in the process, which is a lot of the phone calls that we were receiving. We built systems in place to allow for providing more real-time feedback as far as where individuals were in the application process.
And I'm looking to Ms. Song if there's any other kind of process improvements that we made in licensing she would like to add. But on the whole, I would say that just looking at program efficiencies internally and making some of the application parts electronic so that we can automate more of the steps in the process has helped with our turnaround times, which has in turn lessened some of the calls and emails coming in. And we hope to continue to do better as the board has established in its draft strategic plan, which we will be talking about later today, with the 2-week turnaround time for processing an application, doing that initial processing. I think that will in turn provide the customer service that our stakeholders expect and that we expect to provide. In order to do that, we are needing to have staff growth, which is also addressed in the draft strategic plan, which once we have the staff available to assist with the turnaround times and continue to automate the licensing and renewal processes, that we can be more responsive and provide better customer service. I'm hoping that kind of answers your question. There's room for growth. We can do better, but we have taken steps in a positive way, I think.
That does answer my question. And another question I just had was, are there any other boards that have like an open office hour where you signed up on a Calendly on a Friday for like a 30-minute time slot? Because the other theme I noticed was emails, some things require more than just an email interaction. Do board staff make themselves available for an appointment in terms of like, this, I would like to talk to someone, and can we set up a time to talk to this person? I'm just curious if this board or others have been able to recognize that some things require phone conversation, and perhaps making an appointment with an individual is more helpful than waiting for the individual to call and hope to reach someone.
I can speak to that for CPD. Yeah, if you shoot me an email at bopce, sometimes we'll just, and let me know you want to talk, we'll set up a time and a date where we can have that meeting. So we do that as well with, especially with the new CPD regs coming out, out now. So that is available option.
And it's not something that the licensing unit currently offers, but it's something that we can take back to discuss with staff, if that's a possibility.
I'm not making suggestions today. I think I'm just asking out of a place of curiosity, and I'm mindful of your earlier comment about the strategic plan and staff capacity to do that. I do know that with Calendly and a bunch of other options these days, setting up an automated feature to find 15 minutes to talk to someone is fairly easy and free. And I recognize that any technology solution involving the state of California, even if available to the mass public, can take years for adoption. So.
Any other comment? Any other board comment? Oh, let's say, do you have more? I'd like to open up this item for public comment. If you have a comment, please step forward. Thank you. I will close this item, and we will officially break for lunch and see everyone back here at 1:30. Thank you so much. Hello, and welcome back from lunch. It is 1:35. Ms. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Here. Cervantes. Here. Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets. Nystrom. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Rascate.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here. Thank you very much. Quorum is established. We are going to take up agenda item 22, which is review and possible approval of draft 2024 through 2029 strategic plan. The board met in December 2023 to draft the 24 to 29 strategic plan, and the solid team drafted our strategic plan that is already in the board packet. I'm thinking let's just go through the document to see if anyone has edits. And I think Ms. McCochran is going to document our edits, and we'll just go section by section if the board is good with that. Trying to think. I'm like, I don't have the right angle. Mr. Fu, can you help lead us through what is on the screen? We're just going, I'm sorry. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but.
Thought you wanted me to start singing.
Yes.
No, just kidding.
Here's your microphone.
So we are right now on About the Board, President Tate.
Yes. Frank. Any about the board? Any edits or changes from the board on this page? Oh.
This is page 4 of the strategic plan.
But in the packet, what? Oh. 209 of 515 in the entire packet. Are there any changes on About the Board? Okay, keep moving.
The next one is a message from the president. Dr. Tate, do you have any changes to your message?
I have quite a few. Thank you for asking. No, I do not have any. Does anyone else have any changes to my message?
The next item is, the next page, which is page 6 of the strategic plan, is board mission, vision, and values. And the mission of the board currently, as proposed, reads, the Board of Psychology protects consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists and associated professionals, regulating the practice of psychology, and supporting the ethical evolution of the profession.
Any edits, changes to that from the board?
And then the vision states, a healthy California where our diverse communities enjoy the benefits of the highest standard of psychological services. And then the values are collaboration, commitment, customer service, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, ethics, and transparency.
Any questions, comments? Dr. Kasuga, were you making a comment? Or had a thought? Nope. Okay.
The next page is going to be on goal 1 related to licensing. And I won't read all of it, but.
No, please don't. Just any edits, we've had time to review this document since December, so. Any edits? Okay.
Your next page is goal 2, continuing professional development.
Edits, corrections, thoughts?
Do you,
Okay. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go.
Dr. Tate, did you want me to pause here before we continue going for any public comment on the items previously, or do you want me to continue through all the entire document?
I was going to go through the entire document and then
Yes.
take public comment after, unless.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Rogers?
Sorry, just going back to goal 1, goal 1.1, where it talks about licensure of new psychologists and psychological associates. Do we need to have our new category listed here?
Psychological testing technicians.
On page 212 of the board packet.
Dr. Rogers, I believe when we discussed adding particular categories, the associated services was kind of lumped into one general category, from what I remember of the discussion.
Dr. Tate, I think you're referencing 1.1, where psychological testing technicians aren't included.
Yes, 1.1.
And I guess those are areas where there have been longer processing times, I'm just kind of deducing, and we don't have that data for research psychoanalysts because we haven't started registering them. And then psychological testing technicians, it's still very early with the data since January 1 implementation.
Okay, all righty, thank you.
Okay.
So we're going to now go to goal 3 around policy and advocacy.
Any board comment? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be on this microphone. I just was doing things. Oh, thank you.
I'm not seeing any board members with comments, so I'm going to go to goal 4, enforcement.
Thank you. Any board comments, edits for enforcement? Keep going, Mr. Fu.
Goal 5, outreach and communication. This is page 11 of the strat plan.
I don't see any board comments, edits.
Next page is goal 6 around board operations.
I don't see any board oh, Ms. Nystrom, did you have something? Yes. Oh, okay. Last one, Mr. Fu.
Page 13, strategic planning process.
I don't see any movement.
Madam President, I move to adopt the strategic plan as presented.
Thank you. There's a first and a second. I'd like to open up this agenda item for public comment. If you have public comment on the strategic plan, can you please come forward and have a seat? Okay, coming back to the board. Ms. Whitney? Call for the vote.
Aye. Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harpsheets? Nystrom?
Here, I mean,
Phillips?
Aye.
Frascati? Aye. Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Moving to agenda item number 21, discuss and consider mandatory EPPP 2 on January 1st, 2026. Dr. Kasuga, please.
I will have Ms. Whitney provide a contextual summary of the history of the EPPP2, and this is for informational purposes only.
Good afternoon, board members. In 2017, a task force was created with representatives from various stakeholder groups and chaired by Dr. Cheryl Kasuga. Member Mr. Fu was also part of the task force. The task force met in April and June of 2018 to consider the pros and cons of the proposed examination. A full report was created and is attachment A in the materials. In December of 2018, the board addressed their concerns in a letter to ASPPB. ASPPB provided a response in January of 19, which is attachment B in the materials. In summary, the ASPPB Board of Directors determined the jurisdictional use of the enhanced EPPP would not be mandated during the initial implementation process. However, they would revisit the implementation process of the examination and determine whether or not to continue delivering the EPPP Part 1 as a standalone option or only to deliver the enhanced EPPP. They would also take into consideration the time it takes for California to develop and implement regulation changes and factor that into their decision. ASPPB also reduced the exam fee for the EPPP Part 2 from $600 to $450 and allowed the board access to beta testing information from participating jurisdictions to enable the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services, also known as OPES, to conduct an audit of the EPPP. OPES completed this audit in April of 2021, and this is attachment C in the materials. The audit was presented at the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee meeting in October of 21. However, further discussion could not be made until the ASPPB Board of Directors decided how they would move forward. In October 2022, the ASPPB Board of Directors announced the implementation of the enhanced EPPP two-part exam to become effective January 1, 2026, to all member jurisdictions. That announcement and factual overview are included as Attachment D in the meeting materials. Attachments E and F are letters of opposition and in favor of implementing the EPPP Part 2. In April of 2023, EPPP Ad Hoc Committee met to discuss Part 2 and make recommendations to the board. The recommendations made: one was to adopt the two-part exam effective January 1, 2026. Recommendation number 2 was to have staff conduct an analysis of developing a California practice exam to be reported at the board's third quarter 2024 meeting. Recommendation number 3 was to direct the executive officer to continue to work with ASPPB and communicate any barriers to licensure concerns from the board. The committee also reviewed the proposed statutory and regulatory language that would enable board staff to implement the two-part EPPP exam. In May of 2023, the board accepted the committee's recommendations and agreed to adopt the two-part EPPP exam on January 1, 2026. OPES will present the cost breakdown of a California exam to the board in August of 2023. Again, this is for informational purposes and no action is required, but I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify that in the August 2023 board meeting, OPS presented like a cost breakdown, but there will be a follow-up full report on that, and that will be for our August 2024 board meeting. Does any of the board members have questions? We'll go with the public. Do you have any questions with regards to agenda item number 21? Seeing none, that concludes item number 21.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. We will take up agenda item number 24. This is review bills for active position recommendations. Mr. Polk, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tate. Item 24, review bills for active position recommendations. Item A is AB 2051 Bonta, Psychological Interjurisdictional Compact, information about our work on this matter. The board's work on this matter can be found from page 275 to 462 in the combined packet, and an analysis about the bill and a fact sheet were added to our hand carry folder. Mr. Polk?
Yes, thank you. On February 2nd, Assembly Bill 2051 was introduced by Assemblymember Bonta. This bill would make California a compact state. Under the psychology Interdictional Compact, also known as SciPact, to facilitate the practice of telepsychology and the temporary in-person, face-to-face practice of psychology across state lines for licensees who have authorization. Included in the hand carry items, as it was stated, is the analysis that was conducted on the bill that is included as attachment 3. The bill text which is included in attachment 3, as well as the commission rules and bylaws in attachments 4 and 5 in the meeting materials. The board has previously completed a full analysis on SciPac in 2015, and the board has historically opposed joining SciPac. And in reviewing the bill language and SciPac rules and language, there appears to be no changes between the language in AB 2051 and the laws and bylaws that were previously reviewed in 2015. 2021. And in reviewing the bill text, the same concerns remain with the introduction of AB 2051, and the concerns include the payment of fees for operations of the SciPac, as there's no funding for California to become a compact state, and it appears that all fees are paid to ASPPB and the commission. Another concern is the promulgation of rules and laws by the commission, which would have the force of law in the compact state, which includes the approval of temporary practice across state lines, possibly adverse actions, criminal history, and investigations. Also concern of the requirement of graduation from an APA accredited program in order to attain the e-passport or authorization to provide services across state lines. The APA accreditation requirement also appears to conflict with Business Professions Code 2914, as stated, as no educational institution shall be denied recognition as an accredited academic institution solely because this program is not accredited by any professional organization of psychologists. Another major concern that comes up with AB 2051 is the enforcement of workload and cost, as there is a potentially no reimbursement for enforcement actions for licensees who are licensed in another state, and potentially a large increase in workload for the board's enforcement unit. The board has also received public comments in opposition and support of AB 2051, which are included in the hand carry items. Considering all the information and in completing the analysis of AB 2051 and review of all supporting materials, the staff recommendation is that the board take an opposed position on AB 2051. And I am here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Is there any faculty or staff comment on this item? Sorry, my...
I move to adopt the staff's recommendation.
To adopt staff recommendation to oppose AB 2051?
I second.
It's been moved and second to adopt staff recommendation to take an opposed position to AB 2051 by Dr. Phillips and second by Dr. Kasuga. Is there, I don't want to slip and say the faculty word again, but I just said it on purpose. Is there any comment from the board before we open public comment on the motion? I'll go ahead and open public comment. Please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, and thank you, President Tate and the board, for the opportunity to comment on this important action. I'm Dr. Willow Pearson Trimbach, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in California. I'm also an associate professor and director of clinical training at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And I just have a few points that I'd like to make to strongly advocate that the board indeed oppose AB 2051. First, I'd like to comment that SciPact would create, as we've heard, two separate types of psychologists in the state, discriminating against regionally accredited programs. SciPact would destroy the board's history of maintaining equality between regionally accredited programs and APA accredited programs. Our regionally accredited doctoral clinical psychology program at CIIS serves and supports underrepresented students and underrepresented and marginalized communities. And CAPIC, which is the California Psychology Internship Council, as you all know, is a vital space for community and low-fee clinics, providing thousands of clinical hours per year. And SciPact would jeopardize CAPIC's ability to exist, which is, as you know, created for all regionally accredited programs. All regionally accredited programs go through CAPIC, and while APA accredited programs go to sites nationwide, thus SciPact undermines consumers' ability to access quality mental health, especially for those who are struggling economically. CAPIC sites, because they are mostly low-income community mental health clinics, are unable to afford the difficult and expensive requirements to become an APA internship site, and therefore would not be able to become an APA internship site if CAPIC no longer existed. The Board of Psychology has already analyzed, as we've heard, and rejected joining SciPact, and there's nothing new in Bonta's bill that changes those previous analyses to support what was said earlier. AB 2051 would strip the BOP of its oversight and decision-making powers and lead to potential future legislation that would put the BOP in the whims of political opinion rather than focusing on what is best for consumers of psychology in California. So just one last point. Thank you for your time. We strongly recommend at CIIS that the board advocate that SciPact change its bylaws to allow regionally accredited programs in California to become eligible if they are to pursue this legislation in any way. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Dr. Renee Dumais, and I'm the chair of the PsyD program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. I'm very happy to hear that the bill is being recommended to be opposed, and I just wanted to reference certain aspects of it that I think are really relevant. At CIS, we believe that the adoption of SciPact would place our students at a severe disadvantage within the psychological marketplace, and their clients who are disadvantaged, mainly disadvantaged and underserved clients. Most of our students work in community mental health settings with socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals, minority communities, and marginalized groups. These types of clients seek to have clinicians who are similar in racial, ethnic, socioeconomic status, who understand their unique challenges of discrimination, oppression, systemic racism, and classism. For many of these clients, they have needs to be mirrored, to have a model that can be acted to idealize, and someone they feel similar to. These are crucial therapeutic elements to their growth and healing. Our school, our department, and our clinicians have always been at the forefront of social justice in psychological education and practice. All regional accredited universities and colleges would also be deeply impacted by this implementation. Schools such as Antioch, Pacifica, which I was a graduate of, Saybrook, Sophia, Chicago School, the Southern California University. Together, we produce hundreds of graduates every year and provide tens of thousands of clinical hours in California through the public mental health system. SIPAC would leave these clinicians and their clients at a serious disadvantage and restrict the practice of teletherapy to those who are APA-approved schools that do not necessarily support community mental health clinics, and these are the clinics that need the most help. We believe that the public is best served through multiple voices, diverse approaches, and culturally appropriate interventions. Anything that restricts the practice of any licensed California psychologist is not in favor of this pluralistic, inclusive, and diverse vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we have a motion. A motion to adopt staff's recommendation to take an opposed position on AB 2051. It was moved by Dr. Phillips and second by Dr. Kasuga.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
One of the questions I have, and I'll direct it to all three of you, and you can decide who to answer. The fact sheet from Assemblywoman Bonta's office states that when Californians do find a psychologist, they're not able to see them when they're traveling out of state, or and I'll just stop there for now. I'm curious, is that accurate in terms of, that's dependent on that individual state's laws with regard to telepsychology, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And do we have a sense of, have there been accusations, which this is probably more suitable for Ms. Monterrubio, but have we received complaints about California psychologists practicing telehealth in another state when their client is traveling, to your knowledge? Is that a significant source of enforcement action? Sorry, Ms. Monterrubio.
Good afternoon. No, we haven't received very many complaints at all. I don't have the exact number, but I would say it's probably less than a handful that we've received.
So it seems like the fact sheet may actually not contain facts when it comes to what psychologists are able to do, California licensed psychologists are able to do with regard to telehealth in other states.
Correct.
Okay. The other, I'm curious also about this conversation with regard to access to care. Now I have all four of you. This is even more entertaining.
Electing people.
Who else wants to join the table? I'm curious about the access to care question because one of the reasons why advocates have suggested we do this is because it actually opens up access to care. And I'm curious, do we have a sense of what other states' provisions of these services that would widen that? So let me be more specific. So this fact sheet indicates that only 7% are fluent in Spanish in California. Based on who has adopted SIPAC, those states don't necessarily speak to me as states that have higher language, Spanish language speakers. Do we have a sense of if this would actually widen access to care?
In that specific, in the provision of bilingual services or to other underserved communities, I don't have any information on that. I don't imagine that it would necessarily. I can't imagine that California is tremendously far behind the 40 states that are currently members of SIPAC in that regard, but I don't have any data to back that up.
And if I recall, I think we have the most licensees of any of the jurisdictions in Canada or in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, we would immediately account for, I believe, 20% of all potentially eligible licensees under this.
So 7% of our licensees, just numerically, is going to be a larger number than perhaps some licensees in an entire other jurisdiction.
Yes.
Interesting. The last question I have about this is, with regard to SIPAC, is how have other states grappled with the issue of only APA-accredited programs?
That I do not know.
Okay. All right, I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Phillips.
In response to Mr. Fu's last question, most states require APA accreditation in order to get licensed. So there's not a lot of analogous states. That's not true. Isn't it? No. Okay, I'm wrong. There's one other point that I wanted to make relative to this particular topic, and that is that I think in a strange way, by creating a class distinction between people that went to APA accredited schools and regionally accredited schools, APA schools generally be considered more elite. And with the regionally accredited schools tending to represent more kind of philosophical diversity in terms of what's being taught in the programs, and having higher proportions of underrepresented students in their student body, in addition to the considerations that were brought up by the representatives from CIIS about what mental health clinics are being served by particular graduate programs, I think we may end up in an unfortunate situation, which I'm not saying anybody intends, where we could be reinforcing a type of structural racism and a structural ism, where we are only providing a particular facility to those who have graduated from more elite programs. And that, for me, is entirely problematic as the California Board of Psychology.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Is there any other board comment? Okay, then we should call the vote on the motion that's on the floor. Does anyone need the motion repeated, or we're good? Let's do it.
Kasuga? Aye. Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harbsheets? Nystrom, you're recused, correct? Phillips?
Aye.
Briscotte?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 27.
Can I have a question? It's on the matter, but it's not going to affect the motion.
Absolutely not.
Is this? Did you say no? I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't catch this. Is this bill going to the suspense file, by any chance? Do we know this is this key fiscal? This bill?
We're checking that right now.
Okay, no worries. We can get back to that. I was just curious if this is going to the suspense file, and given where the analysis that Mr. Polk provided around the cost of the bill. Thank you, Dr. Tate.
Okay.
Will it take a minute, or do you want me to move on to? Oh.
It's showing that it's been referred to the Business and Professions Committee. I don't know if it's been suspended, and I don't know what the threshold is for it to have been keyed fiscal. We do anticipate there being a fiscal impact to us of approximately, we'll need at least one AGPA or SSA analyst position in enforcement.
Not a problem. Again, agenda item number 27. This is recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. So I'm opening this up to the board members. Any suggestions, any thoughts? Future board meeting? Nope. Dr. Kasuga, do you want the mindfulness exercise on there?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for reminding me.
I'd like to open this up for public comment for agenda item number 27. If you have some suggestions for us for a future board meeting, can you come forward and have a seat? Okay, thank you. Before we adjourn for the day, this is the last, oh, never mind. Ms. Sorick, please.
Really quick, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of folks. To Ms. Snyder, who is at home and hopefully not tuning into the board meeting today because she just entered retirement. I just want to say kudos to you on your years of service. Appreciate all that you do or did for the program. And then I also wanted to give kudos to Ms. McCochran. When I started with the board, she was an office technician, and it's been really wonderful to see her grow in this new role and really take on continuing professional development. It's been a joy to watch her thrive, and I just want to say congratulations on your promotion, and we'll miss you.
Nice job, Ms. McCochran. Ms. Sorek took my thunder, but I was going to say, this is the last time I get to ask you to come forward and let everyone know about their CPD credit for today. And congratulations again.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. So for today, you get 6 hours, so you can put that in your records under CPD Category 1, attendance at a Board of Psychology meeting. You're going to put today's date, and then the board meeting, and then 6 CPD hours. Signing off. Thank you.
Signing off. Oh, my God. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate seeing new faces in the audience, and our meeting today is adjourned.